You know what I titled? Sorry. No,
I gotta press the woman.
Yeah, the woman. Yeah.
There she is.
Oh.
I pressed.
I
the
titled
woman.
this my session is music dead podcast.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably what. Now thinking about it, that probably should be the name of episode 137 of Impossible Way of Life.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Thinking about it.
And the only person who will take, issue with that is that Instagram account, Music Ain't Dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's one that we've followed, right from the get-go.
Because I think they have a different take on it from...
Well, there's a lot of kind of nostalgia style accounts like that, kind of like Music Ain't Dead, which actually is quite apt for today's episode, but also like kind of like Blues Forever or something.
Well, it's more like think about this for irony. It's an account saying Music Ain't Dead, and they just post like Jimi Hendrix videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the music lives on. John.
Oh, I see. But but
that's how they do it. You see,
he's dead. It's very
but
clever.
The music, it's
very
quite
clever.
Yeah, there's a fine line.
Very clever.
I just want to say to everyone listening to our Wednesday episode of Impossible Way of Life, you missed a belter last Sunday because we found this sweet playlist. So anyone who didn't listen and isn't a patron, shame on you for one, but it's not too late to convert. It's kind of like never too late to join. And we played some really fantastic stuff. Really, really fantastic new music from classic artists. Mm-hmm. And then kind of it spurred on kind of a bit more of a thought about this kind of stuff. So we're here to talk a little bit more about that, just conceptually. But one thing that did happen, we played a new Bryan Adams song. And also for the listeners listening, you don't realize Johnny's actually been suffering from the novel coronavirus.
COVID 2022.
For the last week. So you feeling a lot better right now?
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better.
You sound better actually than last Sunday.
Yep, I'm better.
You were
kind
of in the throes of it. Honestly, like that's dedication. That's that kind of LA mindset. I think
no days off.
No days off.
Kind of that Aaron Rodgers mindset.
Well, I mean, you could say so. I mean, isn't that kind of? I didn't want to say you were unvaccinated again. You know what I mean? But like you're calling to kind of kind of like talking about guys who are famously anti-vax there. So
well, it's just more like just willing to kind of get out there on the field and kind of risk it all.
Actually, before we start talking about music, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about Shapovalov's kind of his kind of statement about Nadal yesterday?
I haven't heard it. I'd love to hear. Tell me about it.
Welcome to Impossible Way of Life, your Grand Slam tennis podcast.
ATP podcast.
Yeah. So he lost in 5 sets to Nadal.
To Rafa. Okay.
Because Rafa's making another play. You know how Rafa dopes, right?
Yeah, this is what your friend over at the bar says, but I don't buy it.
So he doesn't play for 6 months, and then he comes in and plays like he does these Grand Slam runs, right?
Well, I mean, he's got to take care of his body, man. He can't play. He can't play all the time. He's got a lot of injuries.
So this is the issue Shapovalov has, is that on the court when they were playing, he was 2 sets. He was he lost the first 2 sets. Mm-hmm. And then he won the last 2. But he was constantly going at Rafa and the referee to the point that he said, "You're all corrupt," to them on when he was on the court because of the referee's timekeeping. He said everyone else on the tour has to play, to the sets in certain amount of time, and Rafa doesn't. They don't make him. And like he said, I respect what he's done, but I stand by the comments. It's a corrupt sport. They protect kind of NBA style.
Yeah, here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say about it. Okay, I've been watching tennis a long time.
Well, you're a big guy for tennis. You're kind of a little bit of an infinite jest, kind of Foster Wallace tennis kind of energy.
Sure. I'll tell you what. As far as I can tell, I don't know what the rule is, and nobody really knows as far as injury timeouts, bathroom timeouts. This is the tale as old as time. They've been complaining about this since the 80s. Like, I feel like that it's like all of a sudden somebody goes out and has to get the trainer out to like rub some like massage oil on them.
Hogan style potions.
Yeah, and the other person's complaining and they're yelling, "Oh, they've been done too long." But as far as I can tell, I've never once heard like the exact rule of how long you're allowed to take or whatever it is. And maybe it's true that these guys get a little bit of favoritism,
Kind of
but
the Kobe treatment.
I thought that they kind of made it recently, like, yeah, you're allowed to do it if you need.
He took in the he won the first 2 sets, Rafa. Then lost the next 2, and before the 5th set, took
classic
his
move.
3rd medical break and then a bathroom break. So Shapovalov was out there for 7 minutes, just getting furious at this.
Bit sleazy.
And the referee himself, the umpire, when asked about an earlier kind of moment that this happened, when Shapovalov had been waiting for about a minute and a half to start the set, and Rafa was just taking his time, he said to the umpire, "Why aren't we playing?" He says, "You're not ready." He said, "I've been waiting." So he was really kind of pissed about this. And I'm just saying, he's a young Canadian.
Here's what I want to know: what had the 5th set started?
No.
Okay. Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe
sleazy.
Maybe Shapo's got the momentum going into the 5th.
He did.
But you know what I say? Keep that mental game strong. You just buckle down. You get ready for him to come back. You get ready to play, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but like, if you can't win, I don't know. I get it though. It's like Rafa was probably hurting, and then he got to heal a little bit.
Well, he went to juice in the bathroom. That's what he does, right?
Oh no, I think he just needed a little like break to like
blood
get
transfusion.
his energy back and little rub down and all that.
Yeah, blood transfusion.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as I know, it's legal
to get blood transfusions in the washroom.
Well, to I don't know what he's getting.
Have you seen the way that Rafa has that kind of OCD thing he does, where he touches his nose, all that shit?
Yeah, of course.
That's a fucking impossible way of life, right there.
Yeah, that's his thing. I mean, I know he's an eccentric fellow, and he's got all those kind of quirks and all the stuff with the timeouts, all that. But I still say, for my money, he's maybe the top to ever play the game. So.
Okay, interesting. That's an interesting take. Here's what I'd like to say.
In his prime, I think there were a few that
on
could
clay.
be. Well, there's no doubt on clay. He's the best all time.
Would you say it's kind of like similar kind of thing to like, just to bring it back maybe to the music world, like he's kind of like technically the best on clay, like the same way that Paul Rodgers, for example, is the best technical singer. And similarly, to go a little bit even further, Chapo maybe, is what he's showing is that kind of Rod Stewart energy of fearing playing, on the same bill as Paul Rodgers.
Well, he's a lot younger, It was more like, I would say, it was more like there were a lot of guys. I'm trying to think of like an Andy Murray, Andy Roddick. These kinds of guys back in the day, when Rafa was in his prime, you don't step onto the clay court with him. Or, I mean, at one point, I think he was like something like 114-0 in games on clay. Or it was some ridiculous time. I mean, that's one of the most dominant in all sports.
That's almost like Freddie Mercury energy in terms of like.
I know you're trying to like
performing.
pivot this back to music right now. I just have one more thing to say though
about Rafa.
Yeah. Is that you see, the thing is that people forget when he was in his prime, he was taking it to Federer, who was also young and playing great. When they were both at the top of their game, Rafa was quite a bit ahead in the
Beatles
head-to-head.
Stones.
Kind of, but Rodgers more Beatlesy to me. Rafa's more like Stonesy, kind of power game. You know what I mean? More Stones, kind of
long hair,
Jagger, sort of Spain, kind of. You know what I mean? And Rodgers a bit more kind of like wears nice watches.
Let's just make sure we're not talking about Paul Rodgers. We're talking about Roger Federer here. I just want to clear it up for the gang.
Yeah. Well, Paul Rodgers is definitely more Stones than Beatles, I would say. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course he is.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the technical side of things. Well, Beatles aren't very technical.
No,
actually,
they're not
at all.
no.
Which is interesting.
Sort of maybe this segues well into because we got a lot to cover today. This is kind of a serious episode of Impossible Way of Life, but maybe before we get there, it segues into your kind of latest endeavor. I mean, we kind of have different. It's a multifaceted podcast, and we have a lot of different things that we do. And I know that I've been kind of reading over like articles on whether music is kind of dead, or at least if these publishing deals are. I've been crunching the numbers, okay?
Yeah.
On some of these publishing deals
Yeah.
that, the likes of Dylan, David Crosby, Motley Crue have been doing. And but I know you've kind of, kind of your tentacles have been elsewhere. You've been in touch, trying to get to the bottom once and for all to a question that needs to be answered, and it turns out that the guy who can answer it lives very close to us. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I've been kind of wondering about this whole technical singer thing, what it means, who are the most technical, mostly just like, where technical singing comes from. Is it the diaphragm? Is it the stomach? Is it the testicles? Is it the throat, the heart, whatever. And, every single Google search I do, every query I make leads back to Paul Rodgers of Free, Bad Company, etc., right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of looked it up. I think he lives in the Okanagan here.
Yeah, he's really close. Unbelievably. He married Miss Canada in 1986 or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went, I reached out. I sent him an email through his website.
Yeah.
And I
Paul
just
Rodgers
said,
at gmail.com, presumably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, bad company for life at gmail.com.
Nice.
Technical
singer Paul Rodgers at me.com.
Sure. Number one most technical Paul Rodgers at Hotmail. And basically I just said, look, I laid it out really clear. I said, look, we have a podcast. We were wondering if you'd be interested in coming on as a guest. Yes, it's kind of a comedic commentary on classic rock. Yeah, I just kind of laid it out because they're going to look on probably on our Instagram or something. They're going to see all these demented videos of Dave Grohl
of Paul Rodgers
of Paul Rodgers as Frodo or some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so I said, look, yes, it's a comedic take on classic rock commentary, but I said we are both both professional
fans.
Touring and recording musicians and massive fans of the genre. And we legitimately just would love to have a nice, friendly chat with Paul.
And I want to get to the bottom of it. What the hell
I didn't get into
on?
The details about the techno. We're going to get to that. And we're going to ask him all about Rod Stewart, too, and whether he's aware that he that he feared.
Oh, he's aware, buddy.
Yeah.
Massive rivalry.
Where is Paul Rodgers from, James?
I don't know. Should we look
in England? You might need to work on that impression. I wonder if there's some interviews and maybe
I feel like he's going to be kind of. He kind of has that Midlands energy.
Yeah.
He kind of has that Birmingham energy. Let's have a look quickly.
Take a look. I'm just going to grab a beer.
Yeah, you should. That's important. Oh wow, he's from Middlesbrough. Well, that's one of the hardest ones to do, and my family's from up there, so I got no chance of doing that.
Where's that?
Yeah, he's from the northeast. Well, he's from the northeast. It's really I can't do it actually. I have to think about Gaza if I try and do it. It had been 5. Well, I hadn't eaten anything in 5 days. I was hanging out with my chicken sandwich, looking for Raoul Moat, And no, it's really hard to do. But
that's how he talks. You think?
Well, you think
and then he sings,
lad, isn't he? No, yes.
Huh? Interesting.
If my whole family's from up there, and I can't do it properly, so.
Well, that's kind of like how you can't do Beatles.
It's true.
It's too close to home.
Yeah, I mean, accent
But
rock. It
Liam's
makes me
just
feel
like
I'm in an accent rock. Fucking Liam, man.
You just woke. Did
I'm
you see
from-
that thing I
didn't
sent
even have
you?
to try to do Liam. I'm from the same like village or suburb as him. So
Do you see that thing I sent you where someone's like interviewing him out in like a field and he
It's
was
good,
like John Lennon?
yeah.
Every answer he had
Fucking
was John Lennon.
mate.
Yeah.
Liam's great because he's got like a true like Asperger's energy that like just when he's interviewed. I've met him too, obviously, and he has an intensity about him that is ultimately socially awkward, which is why it's so gratifying that he is, I would say, without a doubt, the greatest frontman since Mick Jagger.
Oh, that's right. This is your theory.
Yeah.
And I said I argued Kiedis.
Well, no, Kiedis is the most irreplaceable.
Oh, that's your right.
Yeah.
Maybe this is all your theories.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Kiedis is the most irreplaceable frontman in contemporary music.
Right. Okay.
Because, as demented as his vibe is, like, it's incredibly idiosyncratic and no one else can do it,
Amen, brother.
Yeah. I mean, they even replaced Frusciante.
I'm a fan of all this shit now.
Oh,
this is just to take it back into this sort of modern music
Concrete
kind
Streets,
of
yeah.
whatever. Oh yeah,
Original beats, real live MCs.
real live MCs.
Playground tactics. Yeah.
Rabbit in a hat trick.
Exactly.
Just that classic rap shit from
Dude,
Jurassic.
Honestly, there you go. Conscious, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Conscious.
That's sick, dude. I used to love that.
Still do.
Yeah, I do. I haven't heard it in a while. I'm gonna throw it on like next time I can party.
Yeah, I might just put it on and just kind of read some philosophy. You know what I mean?
I don't think J5 are kind of respected in the hip hop world. I heard a funny thing about this. It's almost like if we talked about hip hop, it's like sort of a thing that like they're not considered, sort of because they're like too old school or like too kind of pop. Like
I don't know. You'd have to ask Luke. He's Bay Area.
Yeah,
I think aren't they? Aren't they Oakland?
maybe. I love it, man.
Might not be. It could be from. I don't know where they're from, dude.
Anyway, but when I was younger, I would when you have that kind of more Pitchfork energy, we were like, I'm into cool bands.
I only don't have Pitchfork energy because Pitchfork isn't Pitchfork anymore. I'd still have Pitchfork energy.
Well, I'm talking even pre-Pitchfork that I thought, like when I, past What's the Story Morning, in the early 2000s, like I thought Oasis sucked, Chili Peppers sucked. This was like joke music to me, But now looking back, I'm like, I kind of think it's all pretty good, like it's fine.
But isn't like nostalgia a mental health problem? Isn't that what this is a thing that people say a lot? You see it online a lot. Like it's kind of like one of those listicles about like verbs you never knew existed that like Germans use to describe the feeling of like walking alone at night.
Well, it's more like, I think it's more like Chinese, like in those languages, or they have those
conceptual languages
that they have words for feelings and things that takes us like a couple sentences to describe.
Yeah, they say that a lot, But again, these
indigenous languages too have a lot of that.
Well, the Inuit, have 30 different words for snow. You say so.
Yeah,
not sure if it's true, but
but the thing is though but it is true. That so you're talking about let's get into it here because I know we like to joke.
Let's get to the meat of the bone.
We like to joke around, but I do actually want to talk to you about this for about 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay, what you want? Okay, keep going then.
That you sent me this article in the Atlantic.
Yeah, and I would urge anyone to read this because I must say before we talk about it, I just want to say that like my friend, really good friend, my friend and co-combatant. Zachary Gray from a band called the Zolas, who's a patron and also,
hell of a nice guy
and a thinker, a West Side thinker. He sent me this article in the Atlantic.
And he wouldn't do too well over here on the East Side, dude.
Yeah, I'd be worried.
I told him, like I said, I'm moving over. Like, if you want, I'll come over there. and like
get
visit
coffee,
you, but I was
yeah.
like, don't come up around here, man. Just trust me.
Yeah,
you know,
it's different.
Anyway.
But he sent me this article in The Atlantic. If you just sort of like Google, DuckDuckGo, probably more like, that kind of thing, like type in, is old music killing new music? This article, it's very interesting because its kind of premise is that, and we've talked about this on Impossible Way of Life before, but from a more kind of, I suppose, peripheral lens, that what's going on with all of these kind of old publishing, these like old songs getting these massive publishing deals, and who's buying this stuff? Why do people care? Why does it matter? And this article kind of, and it's really great. I can't pronounce the guy's last name who wrote it. I don't know how to say that, but it's worth reading. And he kind of breaks down the stats a little bit. And old songs now represent about 70% of the US music market. And to put a finer point on it, the newer music market is shrinking. So it's 70% now, but it's growing. And it's becoming more and more pervasive. So, when we talk about these publishing deals that these old artists are doing, it isn't just kind of boomer nostalgia madness or bait. It's truly that this is the most lucrative music market that exists, which is, and if you think about new music, we often think about it as being like kind of genre specific or something, as something different from what we traditionally listen to. But this is all new music and all old music. So like 70% of the music being listened to and consumed and bought is old. And it's kind of interesting. And wonder what that means,
Yeah, well, so we'll kind of jump around a little bit here, but so like this ties into the article I sent you, strangely of all places, that was in the Financial Times. That was I forget the title. Is Beatlemania?
It's how Beatlemania holds us back, and so we're going to kind of go between these two articles, because this article, and just to preface it for the people listening, is an article in the Financial Times by a man called Janan Ganesh, and it's a little bit more pulpy and a little bit more of a kind of severe take. And his kind of basic idea is that people are obsessed with the Beatles because modern culture is so static.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it to me, though, what he said, I agree, it's more pulpy, but there was one point in it that I thought was interesting, that he was saying the reason that so many people, this is his theory, not mine, so many people have gravitated to get back into the Beatles after all these years is because there isn't anything as compelling or as engaging going on in new, presumably rock music.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the interesting thing that he points out is that it's the fact that culture in general, art, has just gotten a bit stale in the format. That's what I thought was interesting. He said the idea of the modern novel hasn't changed since the 20s or something like that, that the songs that are on the pop charts are still basically, in essence, the same format as ones from 1970 that were on the charts. You know what I mean?
Sure,
we still are like writing songs that have this kind of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus structure. They're 3 minutes long, and it's the longest period in human history where everything has kind of just remained the same in that way. And his theory is that that's making everyone kind of be like, there's no... And we're guilty of this too, like all of us. I mean, myself included. And it made me think it is interesting that, like, I get why people would kind of be like, oh yeah, here we go. Like, it's a song again, and like, there's the chorus and there's the thing. It is stale from that perspective.
I think and this.
So, and what I mean is that, so obviously, if all of it sort of is, happening in that same way, then of course people are going to be like, oh, the Beatles are the best still, because everybody's trying to kind of make music in this exact same world that they were in, you know. Same studio, the same style of recording, the same instrumentation for the most part. Like, I'm talking about kind of songwriting, string-based music, you know?
I think that, like, I didn't completely read the article in that same sense as you. I think that, like, what he talks about, and we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit because of, you know, it's like there's these two articles, but they kind of, you know, they kind of talk about the same thing. I think he talks about, it's more about, like, I'm, you know, like, you're kind of opening up a bit of a Pandora's box, because I'm going to end up sounding like a pitchfork guy when we talk about this kind of stuff, but I'm kind of into it today because I'm a bit fired up.
Okay.
But it's kind of like he talks about Beatlemania, like the sort of reinvention of Beatlemania, almost in a kind of Ouroboros style way, where it's like, you know, people are obsessing about the Beatles because there's nothing new around, but also there's nothing new around because people are obsessing about the Beatles.
Right.
You know, and it's just that music and I don't think this relates specifically or only to kind of rock music, because rock music at one point was extremely subversive. You know, Elvis was extremely subversive. Early hip hop was extremely subversive, you know, and the sort of moguls of the sort of can't necessarily predict what's going to, you know, what's going to, like, how a band like the Beatles, they can't really predict those kind of things. It's that bravery of form that kind of creates a band like that. But also, just, I think the idea that is interesting is that, like, the music that is popular isn't connected to the culture, or that, like, the culture that we have, modern sort of post-historical culture, is so static. And perhaps it's because of kind of the, you know, like, the sort of Amazon world that we live in, you know, that, like, the way in which we interpret music, it represents the culture that we live in. I mean, I was thinking about Sgt. Pepper's, for example, like, to get back to the Beatles, and about, like, okay, so this guy's talking about, you know, it almost, you know, kind of as being this strange, like you're saying, like, this kind of format is played out. But you think about Sgt. Pepper's, for example, like, it was kind of like high art, but, like, in a pop format that kind of defined the Summer of Love. You know, and it's like full cultural legitimization for pop music. Like, it's like genuine art pop music. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of what both of these articles kind of get at, is this idea that, you know, there is, you know, massive songs, massive music that exists, but it has no real relationship to what's happening, you know, to people. Like, or the ways in which people are experiencing life. I mean, you can just, like, off the cuff talk about, you know, punk music, early hip hop. It doesn't have to be about classic rock. Like CCR, you start thinking about, like, the Deer Hunter and Vietnam and all these kind of ways in which music related identifiably to the culture that, you know, it existed within.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that I necessarily agree with the Beatles take, because I think that a lot of the reason that Get Back was so successful was to do with the pandemic. And it was like a pandemic project that Peter Jackson had, and the fact that we're all just sitting around and can't go to gigs. So, of course, we're going to be interested in something like that, where you get to be a fly on the wall with, like, in a classic, you know, time period. Yeah. And this, like, really, really famous band. Like, it's not surprising to me, and I don't necessarily think it is indicative of, like, everything now sucking. I think it's, of course, it's you know, to do with the fact that there isn't really any, like, zeitgeist, you know, music right now happening in that way. But I think that's because there aren't big festivals on and you know, things like that happening, where there's, like, moments happening outside of, like, your Spotify account. You know,
it's interesting because the Atlantic article really kind of hits home about this kind of stuff. Because the writer sort of brings up what you just said and sort of talks about the idea that this is, you could possibly blame this obsession with nostalgia and about, times past and it was better on the pandemic. But he also sort of says, like, consider these other trends. That, like, the entire business model of the music industry is on promoting new songs. But, like, all evidence indicates that fewer listeners are paying attention. And, like, the leading areas in investment for the music business is old songs. And that, like, the best-selling physical formats in music are, like, reissued vinyl. And that all of the stores that sell music are going along with it. Like, they don't promote new music.
It's the same as what's happening in the movie business.
Sure.
Because
I mean, I guess the cultural nadir of movies is the best example. The fact that you have, like, sequels and sequels of action movies consistently.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, it's like it's that everyone's afraid to take a chance on anything new, a new idea, because it's much safer to just throw your money at something that's guaranteed to kind of make you your money back than it is to kind of, there's no sort of like, in the 70s, what did they call that in the film industry? It was like the new, there's a name for it, like...
You're more of the kind of cultural aficionado of film. You're
the new wave.
Okay.
Of directors, and this pre-music new wave, you know what I mean? Where the studios were just totally willing to just greenlight any movie, and now you look at Criterion and these things, and you look back and you're like, all of these seem great, you know what I mean? And like maybe but people were making movies for less money, and there was a lot of creative stuff happening. But now it's exactly the same thing with movies. It's so funny to me how it's all in tandem in that way.
Yeah.
That, reissues, all the old artists have all the money in the same way that all of the big studios have all the money in movies, and all they want to put that money towards is repackaging fucking Abbey Road and remaking Iron Man. It's the same thing.
I was looking, it's great in this Atlantic article because he has like a partial list of all of the publishing rights that have been sold since 2019, and it's everyone that you'd expect.
Yeah.
We kind of joke around about David Crosby, but it's Dylan, Springsteen, Paul Simon, Whitney Houston, Tina Turner, the Beach Boys, Stevie Nicks, Ray Charles, Dolly Parton, all these, Bowie, Neil Young.
They've all sold their publishing?
James Brown, ZZ Top, Bad Company. We could speak to Paul about it. I mean, these guys, it's interesting because this kind of segues into, which we can get onto a little bit now, but probably later, this whole Neil Young Rogan thing. Well, like, Neil Young sold his publishing. He sold it. He sold half of it to some, and this is where, like, the world
to Joe Rogan?
Well, ostensibly, he sold half of his, and this is kind of like, probably why David Foster Wallace killed himself, actually, because it's like Neil Young sold half of his publishing to a publishing company called Hypnosis, but spelt the same way as the artist who's dead who made the Pink Floyd album covers. So they've just chosen like a cool name from like kind of history. And he's talking about pulling his songs off Spotify. He can't pull his songs off Spotify. He doesn't own his songs. Doesn't matter whether he thinks he does or not. He's sold his songs to some kind of corporate company, corporate entity that owns them.
Unless he got that kind of ironed out in the contract, who knows? He's like, I'm Neil Young.
I'll give you my exactly. Well, that's
he's like, I'm Neil Young. I need to still be able to publicly say a bunch of bullshit every 5 years.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I mean, he did it with Trump, and he's done it with Spotify. But noticing that. I think in his, specifically what's going on with him, and we're going to get Bleecker on, right? Because Bleeker's on top of this.
Well, he's the one who told me about this. He's fired up.
He's fired up. He's back from cave diving and, what was he doing?
Really
coral
cut.
diving?
He was saying he's really cut. He's been coral diving in Mexico.
Yeah, so he's kind of the Baja, I think.
Yeah.
He's probably using the photos of him coral diving for his next 3 jam band records.
Wow.
You would assume.
Shots fired, man. I can see where you stand on the side of the shred. Same as me. I mean, I'll believe it when he throws down. When he throws down, then maybe I'll back his band. You know what I mean? I've seen what the shred can do. You know? So when the show happens, I got COVID, so I haven't been able to kind of ignite this feud, but believe me, I'm on it. I'm on the job.
Well, now you move to the east side, you have more of that kind of east side energy, which is combative.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that Atlantic article is that they talk so much about the Grammys, which cracked me up. Because I'm like, let me tell you something. Big music fan over here, massive music fan, never gave a shit about the Grammys in my whole life.
But I think what they're talking about is the idea that the Grammys represent some kind of cultural zeitgeist in the same way that old music does.
I don't think so, though.
Or
I
quite
disagree.
the opposite. That
I think it was a joke in the 60s, too, the Grammys.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same thing at all. I think people who don't like music watch the Grammys, and now they watch Dancing with the Stars.
Right. So
that's all it is.
Always kind of...
No music fans ever really cared about the Grammys, I don't think.
What about when Jethro Tull won Best Metal Album in the 80s?
That's news to me, dude. You know what I mean?
But it's pop culture. You know, and it's pop
but it's
culture.
like the Oscars. It's like saying you're not into movies if you don't watch the Oscars every year. You know, it's like it's a different thing. It's like that's people who are in, you know, like who like read the tabloids, like in the UK too, about the royals and all that kind of stuff. It's like that doesn't mean you're not into politics if you don't like that stuff. You know what I mean? No. Like it's very much those are like Hollywood people who are into like it's the 2002 Oscars. Shit, of course, I love award shows, but not the Grammys.
Kind of the Hollywood kind of old
but
Hollywood.
It's a different part of my brain who likes that than like is a music fan.
Right.
Like I watch that for like funny, like, you know, celebrity Hollywood stuff. But, it's not like I'm like, oh man, like I better go out to the store and get all those Grammy nominated CDs every year, you know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I like kind of... What was that woman? Eva Cassidy or something, you know, like these people who were dead people who were built up by the Grammys. I was thinking actually about when we talk about like, you know, this article, talking about kind of, you know, old music being more lucrative than new stuff. And I was thinking about some of the stuff we've covered on this podcast over the year and a half that's so funny. But if you think about it more from a business perspective, it becomes kind of obscene. Like there's so much money in dead musicians that like they're being made to come back to life in deep fakes and holograms. You know, like it's better to invest in like the technology of deep fake Charlie Watts than it is to try and find a new Rolling Stones. Like it's just worth so much more money to like
it's
build.
Better to
like
fade away than to burn out. No,
I was thinking it's funny.
Take
as well,
it real slow.
Like, Neil Young, you know, he wants the free will, but only for himself.
Yes,
you know
exactly.
I mean?
Oh yeah, well put, well said.
But B2, man, it's better to invest in B2 than it is to invest in new music. Maybe
I think that in the next 10 years we are going to see some crazy shit go down.
Yeah,
that like
this kind of like Taxi Driver style stuff you're talking about here?
I just feel like, you know, we're already starting
QAnon
now with
style?
This ABBA, like
hologram stuff.
That kind of stuff where it's going to be like there's going to be a lot of just psychotic ideas where it's going to be like, yep, Beatles are back on tour, and there's going to be like sold out
B2,
and it's going to be like sold out shows at Rodgers Arena. And it'll take it. People will be like, okay, this is too much, and it'll go away. But there's going to be like a period where it's just fucking crazy, where it's all happening, and new music can't, like, you know, Tame Impala can't even get a gig because Beatles are playing the stadium that week.
Well,
kind of like,
ironically, like,
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if anyone. We've kind of hit a bit of. There's a sort of a bit of critical mass, you know, in terms of the sort of eyewall universe that kind of brought this podcast around, because I was just
too much fucking perspective.
Too much perspective. Talk about Elvis. Who'd have imagined in 1955 a kid from Mississippi would become the defining, moment in popular music? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you have to believe it will happen again. You have to believe in that stuff. It's not going to be Elvis, but it's going to be somebody. And it isn't the record executives and moguls because they pursue a strategy. And this is a strategy in your personal life as well that will fail, of just avoiding risk.
Right.
Short term, it's going to work. I've done it loads, the music I've made, but someone will change stuff because music is redemptive, right?
I don't want to. I know where you're headed, and I don't want to. But I just want to say that sort of adds to what I was saying before. Is that I think a big part of it is that people aren't talking. We've talked about this before. Gotten outside of the song, kind of risking it in what they're saying, which is why it's not culturally impactive to an extent too. Because people are still singing about, "Oh baby, you left me," got to ride that train back home.
Well, that's bluesy.
Well, what's the John Mayer one? I'm on the last train running.
And that's kind of nostalgia stuff.
Exactly. But it's kind of like, rock music is all like that lyrically, pretty much. Like,
I don't know, if lyrically, I don't know if you need to be... There's a sort of disconnect between the culture and the music. I don't think you need to necessarily come out and be political or something. I think that even modern politics, at risk of being a cultural podcast for a second, contemporary politics and cancel culture and stuff. I mean, it's ultimately just really cruel and everyone's mean to each other and sort of it's a vampire race to the bottom. I think you can still write a valid love song and it be
for sure.
Massive, you have to believe in that stuff.
Of course you can. But I'm not saying it needs to be political or cancel culture or anything. I'm just saying it has to be of your time.
Yes.
Some aspect of it for it to feel culturally significant. You can have a love song on the record too or whatever it is, but I just mean you're talking about the bands we're talking about, like CCR and all this kind of stuff. It's at least kind of talk a little bit, even in a verse, not even the whole song. Just kind of talk a little bit about that puts you into this era. And people might be like, hey, yeah, it'll date you. And that's what everyone's afraid of. But right now, it might put you into that kind of,
the snare
cultural
sound
space.
Is the only thing that dates music, in my opinion.
Well, I think stick to the good snare sound and just make the lyrics new.
Okay.
That's what I say.
What's the good snare sound, though?
Well, whatever. Just a good sounding snare, according to guys like you and me.
That's the only thing that dates music. It changes, throughout the ages. The Stone Roses' first record sounds like a Byrds record obsessively, except it has an AMS reverb on it, a non-lin reverb on it.
But that's classic. So 90s is 90s was 60s, except for the drum sound.
Late 80s.
Oh yeah, late 80s, 90s. That was the thing.
You know what?
That was the whole. I listened to this. I was listening to Fastball the other day. For some reason,
they could be CanCon. You'd never know.
It sounded like Big Star or something, except for the drums.
Well, didn't you want to talk about that with a lot of kind of 90s American alt rock at one point? That it was all kind of Big Star adjacent?
Yeah, I wanted to really get into this 90s jangle rock.
Yeah.
And it's a great genre, actually. But I want to do a whole pod on it. Maybe Bleeker would be good to have on for something like this. Luke could talk about it too. But about how it was the greatest era because you could be Beatlesy, but you didn't have to be nearly as good at writing songs. And you could still have massive hits. Well, it's kind of the golden age for bands.
But that is kind of almost what the Financial Times article talks about is that
they kind of ruined it. You're right.
Well, what they talk about specifically is that at the sort of the height of the only time that the Beatles standing sagged a little bit is the 80s, and that's because so much new stuff was happening in music.
New sounds.
High grossing films, original screenplays, but also like brand new electronic stuff happening in music.
Yep, totally.
And like, I think another point that is relevant is that like there's an odd it's an odd perspective to be obsessed, and we are obviously, with the worst Beatles record for one, possibly I would say, and also like ultimately like just an entirely banal band breakup of people in their late 20s growing apart, you know, like
I think people are just bored.
Well,
right
like
now.
you know, if they'd have stuck around, punk would have swallowed them up. You know, like
yeah.
You know, they kind of like the concision of their career is what defines them as being kind of ever alive or something. You know.
Yeah. But you're totally right, too. And it's like there's a thing that, like, the 80s, you're right. Very, very original decade musically. And then you move on. And, you know, if I listen to Nirvana, I think this sounds original. I do. The way he sings, plays guitar, the sound of the records. But I listen to Gin Blossoms and I'm like, Beatles.
Yeah. Beatles.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like...
Even though I bet Kurt Cobain would have said he was a Beatles fan more than the Gin Blossoms.
Yeah, he'd say he's a fan.
Yeah.
But, like, in the same way that Neil Young would have said he was, like, a Gene Vincent fan.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he's doing, like a Hurricane, and he's like, yeah, it's like a 50s song or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
that's kind of a Dylan energy.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing. But, like, the greats always say they're into stuff, but then their sound totally original, right? Like,
yeah. Do you think Cobain will get the deep fake treatment, the hologram treatment?
I don't think you can do Kurt like that.
No.
I think he's almost beyond. He's too... Yeah.
I don't think Grohl would want it because he's working on his own legacy as being bigger than Cobain.
No, and Kurt's too much of a rock and roll angel for that kind of thing. I don't think you can recreate him.
I think one of the things in the Atlantic article that I found really, really terrifying was this idea that, and we know it exists, is that even if a song kind of overcomes the obstacles that it encounters and becomes a hit, normally at the kind of, you know, normally like kind of accidentally, sort of in the same way, I suppose, that like, you know, like music from like the Bronx circumvented the record industry at some point in like the 80s when no one gave a shit about it and it became really famous. Like in hip hop, like if a song now manages to do it the same kind of thing, like the copyright lawsuits just kind of come in to swallow it up. The kind of like Tom Petty style, like I already wrote this song, like, you know, I mean, so any additional cash, like, it'll just get transferred to old artists anyway.
It's so true. Like it's like
like the blurred lines thing. You write blurred lines, and it's like whatever you think about that song doesn't matter. But like now Marvin Gaye owns it, or like Bittersweet Symphony. It's like the Stones own that for some reason. Like
as soon as the lawyers got involved in music and just like started, you know, ownership went to that level.
Yeah,
it kind of just sucked the whole soul out of it because it was such a beautiful thing what happened with rap music and the way that they were able to take music and reinvent it and then rap on top of it. And all of a sudden you got a whole new genre and then, you know, money gets involved and then, I don't know. It's just boring because they're not meant to coexist, those things. Yeah. Lawyers, you know, laws, copyright, and fucking art. It's just not meant to be that way, you know? So
I suppose that almost like ties us back in a, you know, somewhat to the Neil Young, Joe Rogan thing, because I kind of have, I sort of like, I think with Neil, like I think that, you know, he's kind of exemplifying the hubris of older artists, even though I think Joe Rogan's sort of reprehensible as a public figure. I think it's sort of strange because of like the hubris that Neil Young has. He sort of still thinks it's like Ohio or something, and that he can even go toe to toe with these people who are like so much bigger, command so much more respect than him. You know, Spotify will just kick Neil Young off they gave Joe Rogan $100 million, to be like the public face of their podcasting branch. But it's interesting because it's like almost like that. I think it's like that Jon Stewart Tucker Carlson interview, that famous one where it's like Joe Rogan's pretending that it's sort of like that, those weird blurred lines between like being a musician. Like Neil Young's just a musician. Like David Bowie has these kind of like, when he becomes Major Tom, he's just being Major Tom, right? Like that's, you don't think he's actually Major Tom. Like, whereas Joe Rogan like brings on people and talks about like mad science and stuff. He's sort of like, well, they're not really scientists, but I'm an artist. I'm just doing this weird thing, but it's dressed up as news, like it's kind of it's confusing like journalism with art or something. It's hard to know like why those two people are even on the same platform.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Can you explain to me what actually is the beef between Neil Young and Joe Rogan?
Well, yeah, I think Neil Young is mad at Spotify for hosting both of them at the same time and wants to pull his music off Spotify.
Hosting them in what way?
Or like literally just putting them on Spotify.
What? That's all it is?
Yeah, Neil Young wrote an open letter saying, demanding that Spotify takes his music off because he doesn't want to be on the same site as Joe Rogan, who he sees as misinterpreting like, the vaccine and bringing on sort of like fake doctors, or like kind of like coloring the argument in a way that, isn't something he agrees with.
Let's get real here. This is really just a play for the Pono.
It could be to do
or
with
like
Pono.
For Amazon vinyl or something like that.
You'd think so, wouldn't you, with Neil?
Yeah, that's the reason Neil's doing this. He's trying to draw people away from Spotify to his shit.
Maybe. I mean, and then but framed in a sort of art v journalism way or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But not.
He's made a deal with Amazon, right?
I think he
Isn't that
prefers
Neil's...
I think he kind of was into Pono and then realized that he kind of got bought out by Bezos and then said, actually, Amazon has great kind of high quality bullshit. Actually, it's funny,
or something?
I went today to shout out to Rufus Guitar in Vancouver.
Nice.
I went there today to buy a pedal. Don't do that often, but I was working in his
Commercial
studio.
Drive?
I went to Commercial Drive one. I bought this pedal. It's really the guitar one. I shouldn't. We should get like sponsored by I'm not going to mention the company because maybe we can work on that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But it's really good, and it's almost like Revolution tone, like really gated fuzz, Velcro fuzz.
Okay.
But I was in Rufus Guitar, and they it looks like it's one of the only places left in the city that looks like Artie Fufkin's record store in Spinal Tap. It's like it's got that full on like it's way bigger than it needs to be and doesn't have much stuff in it, and they were playing Tonight's the Night, the whole record, when I was in there. Yeah. I just stayed in there. Yeah. I was just having a great time. Felt like I was in old Zulu.
Yeah.
I remember that energy.
I remember working in Zulu one time, and this guy was just in there shopping, and I put on Paul's Boutique, Beastie Boys. Yeah. And he just he got one of like a look in his eye, Yeah. And he was just like, man. And he just sat down on the like little stairs near the counter and just didn't move for the whole record.
I love that energy.
And he was just like head down. He was just like, fuck. And he just got up. He was just like, dude, thank you. He was just like, thank you for kind of taking me back to high school there. Well, and he's like, I was just flooded with memories and I knew every word. And he's like, what a record, and just walked out kind of. So that was kind of your vibe, right?
Yeah, it was. But also like this last week, I was over recording music all week on an island, like living and just making music. I refuse to accept that this is sort of like an end game of music. That's the thing, because like you have to have an optimistic view of culture. Unlike, I love music and I love all forms of music, and it has like a life-altering power, and it's very redemptive in that sense. So I think that like, to have that kind of, to view culture as being static makes sense, like the Financial Times article, but things will kind of in the face of that, subversion will kind of create itself. And you need that sort of sows the seeds of it. And to be kind of like blunt, it doesn't mean it's going to be like some sort of strange new form of like hoverboard 22nd century music. You know, like it can be like someone, I think there's still songs in there that you can write in the canon that can be transformative. And I think that, like, you know, I don't think it's just something radical will emerge from like a very unexpected place. I think that's what will happen.
It is interesting, though, that the idea of the song is still the same idea as from, you know, the 1940s,
totally
50s. When you think about it, it is interesting because, you know, music for hundreds of years before was very different.
Yeah.
These long classical pieces and things and whatever it was. But we just really, really thought that was cool. And so now that's what we still do.
I think it's the idea of like modernism, and, you know, like the idea of sort of like the 20s starts with like, he starts in, you know, T.S. Eliot and like, you know, maybe like Hemingway and writers, you know, and Ezra Pound or something, and it kind of goes through the beats and it hits, you know, modernity in music hits with in the 50s, maybe like with Elvis and stuff. And I don't think it's I don't think that was gone, you know.
No, it's not wrong. It's great. It's my favorite stuff in the whole world, and it was so good that they carved out this thing.
I think you got to look to working class neighborhoods. That's where you got to look for this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
because that's where it always comes from. It seems to, and this is like getting really. Welcome to Impossible Way of Life, the you know, kind of politico-cultural podcast, but it's going to come out of somewhere like that.
I'd love to see it, because I'm certainly not going to do it, because I'm much too far gone into.
But you know what we'll
world.
do? We'll
talk about it. We'll be here to talk.
No, we won't even interview. We'll just talk about it. Yeah,
we'll just be here to talk about how great it is. Yeah, and then I'll go and try to write like a 3-minute blues rock song.
Well, listen, I was writing one today in the style of T-Rex.
Nice.
With my Kemper amp.
Nice.
It was literally.
I'd love to hear it. That's the thing too. Is actually like I don't think when my friends do this stuff though, and like it's not even derivative to me, and like especially if they're singing about. That's what I mean. If it sounds like T-Rex and there's even like a line in it that makes me think about you right now.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, this is the greatest music I've ever heard. You know? Yeah. Like, so I'm stoked, you know.
Dude, I'm fired up.
Yeah.
I'm
going to make some dinner here now.
What are you going to make?
Steaks.
You got to get that iron in you. You've been sick for a week and a half,
well,
basically.
I'm hungry, yeah.
How's your young bride?
She's still a bit sick, but we're both on the mend.
I'm glad you are. Brandon from my band, I mean, he wouldn't mind me saying there's no kind of COVID shame, no kind of anonymity needed. He's had it. He got it a couple of days ago, and he's pretty rough. He's in rough shape.
Yeah.
So everyone,
I don't do
literally
not wish
listen
it
to
upon
Neil
anyone.
Young. Everyone should listen to Tonight's the Night and not worry about the kind of like fact that Joe Rogan can't play a show in Vancouver because he has sort of his own.
He only does like anti-vax stuff or something.
I don't know exactly what he does. I mean, I've seen him on the UFC because my young bride's really into it. I don't think he's right wing. I think he's kind of in that strange. I mean, he might be, but I think he's in that kind of strange like political spectrum bit. It's a circle, right? So in that bit where like nutrition and like ultra masculinity can collide with anti-vaxxer kind of paranoia. I think. I mean, I've never really listened. I've no idea.
I listen more to Seth Rogen's podcast.
Yeah, you're more of a Seth guy for sure. Well, that's West Coast.
Yeah. Often I say to people, I was listening to Rogan the other day.
They misunderstand what you were talking about.
And they're like, what? I wouldn't have taken you for being into that. And I say, no, Seth Rogen.
I'll play you something right now, though, on this classic artist's new music, which is in contrary to everything that we've said for the last 57 minutes. I think you'll really enjoy this. This is a song, and I'm just going to let you. I'm going to play the first minute of it because I think you're going to be really into it.
All right.
Here we go. Bit of a slow start, got a bit of a Hajira vibe.
I'm into it.
Your breath is sweet, your eyes are like two jewels in the night. Your back is straight, your hair is smooth on the pillow where you lie. But I don't sense affection, no gratitude or love. Your loyalty is not for me, but to the stars above. One more cup of coffee for the road. One more cup of coffee before I go to the valley below.
Nice. Who's singing that?
Tom Jones, buddy.
Yeah, nice.
Maybe Tom Jones and covering Dylan is the way to the future.
Why did he change sky to night in the first line? Because it didn't rhyme with pillow where you lie.
I think as often happens with these songs, you get a feeling that they're reading it from an iPhone, and it's the only time they've ever heard
That's
the song.
the vibe I
and
got.
They're just
totally.
kind of like, okay, like it's kind of like this all started with the Rubin Johnny Cash stuff, where it's like, there's no way Johnny Cash was listening to like Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode. So they were like, he's on his way out, he's barely cognizant.
Yeah.
Just give him the words to this song.
Hand him a printout from like ultimateguitar.com.
He can, the lyrics might be wrong because we've never even heard the song either. John Frusciante is playing the guitar. Johnny's on the toilet, and which has become a thing now. Like we heard that song on Sunday with Bono, where he's clearly just on the toilet,
where he's doing a lot of,
which he's said like live, like on the internet. He's finally found his voice.
Some of the best stuff he's ever done.
Yeah. Well, we're over 60 minutes, but I'm not now. I'm just a couple more things here, real quick to play. This is so Adele, I guess I didn't say it earlier. Adele has had she canceled her shows in Vegas, and the problem it's because everyone got COVID. She can't play them because everyone got COVID. But the issue is that she can't rebook them for a year because Elton John and Rod Stewart have a residency there for like the whole year or something. So this is like kind of the whole point. The biggest modern artist can't even get in. And this is what Rod Stewart's up to. Take a listen to this shit. This is foul music.
Oh, the sunshine in your smile. Oh, those ruby red lips I've been kissing. Now your family don't like me. This I understand. I don't want to settle down. I'm just a rambling man. I'd rather be out rocking with my good old country band. Yes, I would. But listen, baby, it was great while it lasted. And together we smashed it. There's just one more thing to do. I know that I can keep a secret, baby. Can you too? One more time, baby. One more time, baby. One more time, just for old time's sake.
Unbelievable.
This is just podcast is starting to depress me, man. These past 2 weeks, that's bad.
Well, last week, I mean, on Sunday, it made you realize
I know,
you were
but
good.
now I'm kind of like thinking about the fact that they probably like are getting more plays than I am on Spotify for this stuff. You know what I mean? But that's name recognition.
Honestly, dude, I think it's name recognition. I wouldn't feel down about it. You can't. It's like you're like fighting big pharma. You're like Aaron Brockovich.
I'm thinking about the fact that it's not about my own stuff at all. Actually, what it is that I'm listening to that and I'm thinking about the fact that somebody is saying that this is the way that a song needs to sound for people to get into it now. Yes. And they're like hiring someone to co-write it with Rod Stewart or whatever. And they're like, this is the formula. It's got that 4-chord turnaround and then like anthemic, like double time chorus
the
with the
algorithm
banjo.
Needs this specific say this line again and again.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing. That's like it's just kind of like, oh god. But no, you're right. It's nobody actually likes that. Like nobody some people. It's the people who go to Vegas and they're not interested in music at all, but they see on the marquee. No, I'll go one better. They check into Caesars and they're like, hey, thanks again for coming down, guys. We've got your suite ready. By the way, here's some comp tickets to Rod Stewart at Elton John. Just to show you guys that we really appreciate your business. And then like later on that night, it's like 10 o'clock.
Should we go?
And like the boys are out on the town or whatever, or the gals or the boys and gals.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh man, they're like, well, we've done everything. We gambled, we've been partying, we done everything. It's like, what the fuck are we gonna do now? Like, and then they look up, they're like, hey, it's 10 o'clock. We could go to that stupid Rod Stewart concert that they gave us free tickets for.
Yeah.
They're like, what the hell? It'll be good for a laugh.
I figured out what we need to do.
Okay.
We need to take Paul Rodgers to Vegas.
Yes.
And get him to one of these things. Get him wasted. And get him to go up and challenge Rod Stewart to a sing-off.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the only way to settle this once and for all.
Down at Quixote's open stage. After the show, I'm thinking, hey, Rod, are you down for just like a small bar?
Yeah.
We're going there. Can you still hack it in a small PA setup?
Yeah. without all the live
lights.
auto-tune.
Yeah.
How are you going to handle this once the stage lights are down and there's no tuning?
Yeah, we're talking an SM58 through a fucking mixer, dude.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pick the song.
Yeah.
Pick anything.
Dry. No reverb.
Let's
see how it goes.
Dry.
Yeah.
So none of that kind of formant shifting, like throat effect that you've got on your voice line. That's something I'd watch. Like the opposite of The Voice. It would be people doing like in a shitty setup, figuring out how to sound the best.
Yeah.
You know, I want to see Adam Levine in that setup.
Well, he'll probably be down at Quixote's that night.
I'll be there. Okay, well, it was very nice talking to you, man. Good to see you. I'm glad you're on the mend, and
getting there.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll speak to you on Sunday.
All right. Bye-bye.